Alright everybody, welcome back to another video on the channel. Sorry I did not post any videos last week. Been super busy with a lot of different things and just was not the right time. But today is Monday, and on Mondays we do Breslov History. So usually we're reading from a book called Tzfat, which is all Breslov stories and biographies, things like that. But I've been reading a different sefer. I've mentioned his name before on this channel many times. Rav Shmuel Horowitz. He has a book called Yemei Shmuel, which is basically an autobiography of his life, which is a very, very interesting life. We're going to discuss it in a little bit. And one of the things that he is very, very famous for is going to Uman in the year 1930, when it was basically impossible to get in to the borders of Russia, whatever. Back then it was the USSR, was closed completely, and but he had a lot of azas to kedusha, and there's a whole entire story that we're going to read on how he made it there, because there's very, very famous stories in Breslov of Rabbi Nachman's journey from Ukraine, from Breslov to when he was living, I don't even know if he wasn't living in Breslov then, but whatever, from Ukraine to Israel and back, and also when Rav Nassan went later on. Also, it's a crazy story, but this story is the opposite direction. This story is the story of Rav Shmuel Horowitz, who grew up in Tzfat, and then in Yerushalayim, and him traveling to the Ukraine, or whatever as the place that we now call it, the Ukraine, but Uman, yeah. So basically, let's talk about who Rav Shmuel Horowitz was a little bit before we get into it. Obviously, I'm not going to read the whole entire sefer here, but Rav Shmuel Horowitz basically was born in Tzfat in the early 1900s, and I think he grew up in a Chabad family. And when he was about 13, 14, he became very attracted to Breslov. He found some Breslov books. There was a guy in Tzfat who was into Breslov. Back then it wasn't such a big thing, and he became a very, very serious Eved Hashem. He was living in Tzfat, and the book is basically called Yemei Shmuel. There's actually three parts. One part is published by somebody else. It's hard to find. The first two parts are published by his family. I think it's a whole thing. I'm not even sure. That's what I heard. But basically, he discusses the early days of Tzfat and what his life was like. It's very interesting to see all the different history, because I live in Tzfat, so it's very interesting to see what he was talking about. And it was a very, very hard life. But as he was getting older, he started, hanging out with Breslov Chassidim, and he used to go to Meron. He used to go to Meron anyway when he was Chabad. Everybody then went to Meron, but Meron was very different back then. Meron was empty, basically. There was just the Tzion. There was no city. I think there was a lot of Arabs living there. And he talks about how him and Saba, Rabbi Yisrael Odesser, the guy who found the Petek and the whole Nanach movement, and when Saba was living in Tiberia back then, when he was much younger, obviously, he used to go to Meron with Saba and a few other Breslov Chassidim and sit there for just months at a time and just doing crazy avodas Hashem. The whole book is just like, hey, we got up and we learned for a few hours, we danced for a few hours, we ate, then we danced again, then we did Tikkun Klali, then we did a Spoidus, then we did Likutei Tfilos, then we did this. It was like crazy avodas Hashem, toiling in mikvahs in the middle of the winter, going to Kibbutz Tzaddikim, getting lost, just like all this crazy stuff. And it's very interesting to read as a Breslover. It's a lot of chizik. It's a very good sefer. And he goes into extreme detail about everything, about what he ate that day and where he go and how was this and all that. Anyway, so he was probably about 18, 19 years old. I'm not sure exactly what year. I'm always bad at the years, but he ended up moving to Yerushalayim to be close to the Breslov Chassidim there, because there was more Breslov Chassidim there, and also to find a shidduch. Sorry. And he found a shidduch. And to make a long story short, he was able to get married. He married a pretty chashuv family, because his family was also pretty chashuv. I think his father traveled to America eventually for Parnassa, so he wasn't at the wedding. I'm not sure, but basically after he got married, a few months after he was married, his in-laws and his wife became very serious misnagdim against Breslov, and he was basically kicked out of the house. He was basically kicked out, and he was basically separated from his wife for a very, very long time. And because back then Breslov was also very, was not known as much. They were looked down like crazy people. There was a lot of Breslovs living in Yerushalayim, and he was hanging out with them, and they were like, fine, if you want to stay with your wife, then you have to stop hanging out with these guys. He used to hang out with this chassid. He used to hang out with these two chassidim. They were called Rabbi Alter Ben Sion and Rabbi Yaakov Zev. And they used to sit and they would just do Avodah Hashem, and they would go to Meron, they would go to Shimon HaTzadik, they would go to Cave Rachel, they would go to Hebron. Every Erev Shabbos they would be at Shimon HaTzadik. They would go to Hebron and Cave Rachel every single Erev Rosh Chodesh. They would go to Meron. They would go there. Whatever it was, he found a shidduch and he got married, and then he was separated from his wife, like I said. And he was learning in a yeshiva in the old city of Yerushalayim, and he would learn there with these guys. Even though they were Breslov, they were able to learn in the yeshiva, and he lived in after he was kicked out of his house when he got married, he lived in a little shul in the old city of Jerusalem, this Breslov shul. And he just had tsaros, like unbelievable tsaros. Like the whole entire Yerushalayim was against him. His wife took his tefillin, they wouldn't give him back his talis and tefillin. They used to try to make him sign papers like about, you can't talk to these chassidim, this guy Rav Alter Ben Sion and this guy Rabbi Yaakov Zev. You couldn't go to the shul, you can't hang out with Anash if you want to get back with your family. Like they were trying to basically cut him off from every single thing that was Breslov, and cut him off from Rabbi Nachman, cut off everything. And he was actually helped out a lot by Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. I think he was the chief Rav of the old city of Yerushalayim back then. I'm not sure exactly, but the famous one. And he would always try to be making peace between him and his wife and his family, whatever it was. And they were like, you cannot be Breslov if you want to be married. And he was like, I'm Breslov though. Like I'm not gonna stop being Breslov, And his wife was pregnant actually. And she even gave birth, and they let him come to the bris. Like he was barely allowed to come to the bris. He wasn't even really. They decided on a name without him, but he also added on a name at the bris, and he was just living in Yerushalayim. He was doing major avodas Hashem. He lived in this little shul in Jerusalem, in the old city of Yerushalayim, and like every single day he would go to the kotel and he would hang out with these Breslov Chassidim. And then eventually the Breslov Chassidim also started to turn on him. Not really turn on him, but they were like, we can't really talk to you because his family had such connections in Yerushalayim back then. Whatever it was like that if anybody would talk to him, like they would just start bothering that guy also. So these guys didn't want to be bothered, and what's it called? And they were like, we can't talk to you anymore. So they made him sign a paper like you could still learn in the yeshiva, but it was like you can't talk to the Breslov Chassidim, but you could see them. It was like a whole thing, and it was just not a good life. He had a lot of tsaros, and his mother came back from America. She traveled with his father, and she was trying to help him out, and everyone. And so basically, we have this guy Rav Shmuel Horowitz. He's probably in his early 20s. He lives in Yerushalayim. He's doing major serious serving Hashem all day. He talks about what he did every day. He wakes up for chatzos and goes to the mikveh, and eating with all these different Breslov Chassidim, and doing Purim and Pesach and Rosh Hashanah and everything. And he just lives by himself. He lives in a little tiny shul. And he just talks about all his different experiences. And then halfway through the second book, he starts talking about, and obviously he's always talking about how he wants to go to Uman. Everyone's like, it's impossible, But he's like, listen, he's like, I'm not married right now. He's like, I mean, he's still married, but he's like, nothing's happening. This peace process is not happening. And I'm gonna try to go to Uman. So back then it was different. It wasn't just that you could like get on a plane and go to Poland. First of all, he was not able to go to Russia, where Uman was back then, because Russia was closed. So he had to go to Poland, where the Breslov Chassidim were. They were in Dublin, and he was trying to get them to write a letter so that that they wanted to come for whatever business or whatever it was, so that he could get into Poland itself. But they were not answering him. It was very hard. It was a whole thing. Anyway, he ended up just like forging some document, and like b'shem Breslov, and that he was able to get in. And two Breslov Chassidim in Yerushalayim signed off on it, and like only thing obviously he didn't tell his family that he was going to Uman. That was also one of the reasons why, at the beginning, why they separated him and his wife, is because they found a letter that he was talking about going to Uman eventually. So they were like, oh, he's going to run away from Uman, leave his wife here, and everything like that. Obviously, he wasn't going to do that, but once they separated him and there was nothing happening, so then he left. But when he was married, he wasn't just going to leave without permission. Like, it was a whole thing. There's a lot of information. I can't say it over in one video, but there was a lot of different combination of things why they separated him and his wife and why they kept him from her, and it was a whole thing. So we're at the part of the story, right, where he's going to go to Uman. He finally has a permission paper to go in or whatever, and he got a visa, right? So it says over here is that he bought a ticket for a ship, and he traveled to Egypt in Chodesh El Tafresh Peches, I think in the year 1930. Okay, right? He didn't tell anyone. Only two people knew. He didn't tell his family. He didn't tell his father-in-law, who hated him and wanted to get it. He wanted to get a get from him, but he didn't want to get a get, and so he left. So it says over here. So we're just going to start reading over here where he was. Right, so he didn't make it for that Rosh Hashanah right away, but he spent a long time just trying to get into Uman. So we're going to read about this, right? So he starts talking about it. He says that this journey was very, very hard for me and full of a lot of suffering because, he wasn't used to going outside of Eretz Yisrael. I mean, this guy, if you read the book, he's always traveling and going to Meron and going places, but he was leaving the country for the first time without knowing, how to write the language, how to speak the language, and anything like that. And he was also scared. Obviously, his family was going to find out and going to cause a big balagan. He also, in the middle of the way, he found everybody knew about him. So on the middle of the way, he says that he found two people that knew his situation with his wife and everything like that, and they were going to make balagan for him, but that they wanted to try to get him back to the house and force him back on a different boat, but Hashem did not let them, Baruch Hashem, and it was just crazy stuff, right? So he came to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, and from Mitzrayim he went on a boat to Romania, and from Romania he went to Galicia, and it's interesting that he doesn't describe everything in such detail, because everything else in the book he describes in a lot of detail, like what he ate and how he slept and this like that. Now he's just saying he just went on a boat, and he doesn't even talk about the boat, which is kind of interesting. And then in Lemberg his money finished, and he was able to he eventually was able to work his way into the city of Lublin, where the Breslov Chassidim who lived in Poland were, right? And I was with the different Breslovers there, and they were all very happy to see me, that I made it. And he went on the cave of the Rav of Lublin, the chassid of Lublin. What's it called? And he wanted to go right away to the Gvul. He wanted to go right away to the border and get into Uman, but he was not able to. And he was able to see the Breslov preparations for Rosh Hashanah back then, and he was able to daven in their kibbutz with all the Breslovers, right? And he met all these different Breslov chassidim that he heard about in Israel for so long, right? And he went to all the different cities of after the Chagim. He spent the Chagim there. He went to all the different cities and all the different places of the Breslov Chassidim, right? Of the different Breslov Chassidim, right? Okay, and then he says also during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, he goes back now. So during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, he was on the kiver of Rav Elimelech of Lezhensk, and on Sukkot he was in the kibbutz of Warsaw, the Breslov Chassidim there, and on Shmini Atzeres, the Simchas Torah Beludge. Wow. And on Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, he was in Lodge. That's where my grandfather's from. Could be my grandfather met Rav Shmuel Horowitz. That's pretty wild. That is actually, wow, unbelievable. Maybe he was a little back then, I'm not sure. Okay. And then he was in the cities of Parshischa and Ungar, and he had a lot of Yisurim. He had all these different things. He's going to talk about it later, right? So now it comes time that his visa is going to finish. And there was a guy there in Poland who was helping him out. His name was Rabbi Aaron Leib Zigelman, and he helped him extend his visa, right? And then he was able to be by weddings of Breslov Chassidim in Lodz, and I was there for Hanukkah, and I met Visham Kibalti Chiyas Me'ache Shemenu. He said I got a lot of chiyas from the Breslov Chassidim there, and especially from Rabbi Ben Zion Apter, who my grandfather has mentioned before that he came to his house in Eretz Yisrael also as well after the war. Wow. So Visham Hischel is Tzmichas Yeshua and Asil Uman. There it already started the Yeshua that I'll be able to travel to Uman, because there I met in secret with Rabbi Beirish and Rabbi Zusha Ner Yar. I started talking to them about going to Uman, right? Right, so he started collecting money by the Breslov Chassidim and telling them that he was going back to his house in Eretz Yisrael, right? But really, he was really collecting it for Uman, and nobody knew about this, especially the Breslov Chassidim, because by the Breslov Chassidim back then it was a Isser Chamar Umuchlat. There's no, they basically made a thing among themselves that nobody was allowed to try to cross the border to go to Uman, right? Because of the sakanas nefashos involved in it, right? And it says that year, before he got to Poland, before Rav Shmuel Horowitz was able to get to Poland, he said 2 Breslov Bachrim tried to go to the border to cross into Uman, and they shot them dead and they died, right? So because of all this, he wasn't able to tell anybody that he really wanted to try to cross the border, but only Rabbi Beirish, right? Rabbi Beirish was able to help him. Rabbi Beirish also wanted to cross the border, and he told him the derech on how to go close to the border and all the different names of the cities and the train stations that were there, right? Because Rabbi Beirish, I'm just reading over here. Because Rabbi Beirish and his friend Rabbi Zusha, right? Besides, they knew about this Isser, right? Not to cross the border, right? But they would try every single year to cross the border to go to Uman. They would leave their house in Lodz after Chag Shavuos to start going to Uman. And B'derech Klal, the army, the Polish army would always grab them on the way before they even got to the border. And after many different chakiras, and they would spend time in jail, they would go back to their house and they would try again. B'derech Klal hoyu magiyim lebeisam leChanukkah. So leave after Shavuos to come back Hanukkah. You guys are crazy, unbelievable, right? And this guy Rabbi Beirish also was many years before Uman, right? How much should we do? We'll do another few minutes. Okay. V'nesati b'chazara. So he says that I went back to Warsaw, right? And I got a little bit of kesef, and I went back to Lublin, right? He said that the fear and the sufferings that I had on these ways, it's impossible to explain at all or to even imagine. Only Hashem knows, because I'm not used to any of this, right? He said that I'm usually a very scared person, very shy, right? Very, 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 very worried. And now I'm in a strange country and I'm trying to figure out how to get money and go from place to place, right? And I thought like for sure I'm gonna die, right? And he would just think like, I have one more night to live, one more mincha, and then it's gonna be over. And he was just so scared. He didn't have anyone to talk to, right? And he was sleeping in a shul in Lublin on a bench, right? What's it called? And then one Thursday night, he went out to the train station, and he said, "I'm going to different cities of Breslovers," and he took his ticket he took the train to the city of Rovna, right? And I went there between non-Jews, and they were speaking to me, and I wasn't able to answer them at all because I didn't know the Polish language, right? And I made myself like I was sleeping on the train, and whatever. So nobody would talk to me. And he says over here that I didn't know if you need to make if I needed to switch trains in the era of Kovel, right, to go to wherever he wanted to go. But right away, the conductor came on the train, and he told me to get off and to wait for a second train, right? And I came to so now I came to the city of Rovna in the middle of the night, right? I'm very scared, very very worried, right? Because the city of Rovna is very close to the Gvul of Russia, right? And you can't be in strange people were not allowed to be there because it was so close to the border, right? I didn't know anywhere to go, right? And I went to the Rav of the city, Rav Moshe Eliezer, who Amar Lelech Limalon. He told me to go to a hotel, right? And on Shabbos, he said that on Shabbos I was in the Beis Medrash of the Maggid of Mezrich, okay? And he was just very scared, very intense, and he wants to go to all these things. He wanted to go to the city of Koretz, right? I guess Koretz was even closer to the border. He says, who could imagine how I came to the city of Koretz, right? And I came to the shul of Rabbi Asher, and I slept there, and I was there for 2 weeks, and it was very, very cold. It was freezing, and I went to freezing cold mikvahs, and I had to go down like on a slope into the mountain to get to the mikvah, right? And he would go, and he would while he was there in the city of Koretz, he started looking for the people who were doing these border crossings, like the guys who were working shady stuff on the border. And he finally found one, but he needed a lot of money. The guy wanted $60 to cross the border, right? And he only had $15. Every single day, I took a tehillim and I cried in front of Hashem, right? So we're going to stop here today, and this is going to be part 1. Next week, hopefully, we're going to continue. We're going to learn how eventually he was able to get to Uman, but it's just a crazy story, and yeah, it's awesome. Have a great day.